We'll do some review on topic 6 point, well, actually it's 4.6, in which we are going to FOIL two binomials, but they happen to be complex numbers. So in reviewing the FOIL, we're going to multiply the first two, and that will give us a 30. We're now going to do the outers. 6 times a negative 4i is a negative 24i. We'll do our inners. This is a positive 15i. And now we do the last, which is a negative 12i squared. Now, one of the things we can do right away is we know we never end up with an I squared in any expression. I squared is a negative 1. So we're going to make that a negative 1 times a negative 12. We'll make this a positive 12, and we can just erase the I squared. Now, it's just a matter of collecting like terms. We have a positive 12 and a 30. That gives us a 42. And then we have a negative 24i and a positive 15i, which will leave us with a negative 9i. This is in our standard form, a plus bi. This is the correct way to write the answer. Now, a modification of the FOIL is when we're going to expand a binomial that is a complex number. So we'll go over that rule as well. Negative 3 squared is a positive 9. Now we multiply these two together, and that's going to give us a positive 27, and we double it. That will give us a positive 54i, and now we square a negative 9i, which will become a positive 81i squared. But once again, we know that I squared is negative 1. So, in this case, a negative 1 times a positive gives us a negative 81 here. A little tricky handling everything. And now we group like terms. So this is going to be a negative 72 plus 54i, again in our standard form, a plus bi. Going on, we're now going to do some division or simplifications of fractions that are complex numbers. And the idea here is to multiply your denominator by its complex conjugate. So the conjugate of this would be the same terms, but the opposite sign. So in a sense, we're multiplying this fraction by 1. We have to have this on the top as well. So we now distribute. 8 times 7i is 56i. 8i times 6i is 48 I squared. We'll deal with that in a moment. Let's FOIL our conjugates here. The middle terms cancel out, so it's 7 times 7 is 49 minus 36 I squared. And again, now we could deal with the I squares. So this I squared is a negative 1. So this is going to become a negative 48. And this I squared is a negative 1 times a negative. We'll make this a positive. So we need to put our answer in standard form. So let's go down here. So our real number, well, once we finish this, by the way, is going to be 85. And this is a negative 48 plus 56i. I'm just sort of putting that in that a plus bi form, but this way it's not officially in this form yet. We have to write it separately. So that would be a negative 48 85ths plus 56 85ths I. Now, this is the answer in standard form. Going on, we have another division, which is simplifying this fraction. We're going to use the conjugate of our denominator, which is 3 minus 2i. 3 minus 2i. Remember, we're multiplying this fraction by a 1, and we're using the conjugate. So, as we FOIL the top, we get our outers are 15. Well, I should say our first. Our outers are a negative 10i. Our inners a negative 21i. And now our last, a positive 14i squared. And our denominator, since we're just going to FOIL, and since they're conjugates, there are no middle terms, our first is a 9, and our last is a negative 4i squared. So we have an I squared here, which will make this a negative, and this will become a positive. Okay, so it's much easier now. We have a 15 and a negative 14. That's going to give me a positive 1, and a negative 10i and a negative 21i, a negative 31i, all over 13. But that's not in standard form, which is, again, a plus bi. So it'll be 1 over 13 minus 31 over 13i. And there's my answer. Now, for the last thing we did in this section was power of i's. And again, the strategy was for every I to the 4th that we can find in this, this is going to be a 1. So a multiple of 4 that's in here is I to the 48th. This is divisible by 4. So all of this ends up as a 1, and then we're left with I to the second, which we said was a negative 1. So our 1 times negative 1, this is going to be a negative 1. And for this one, it's I. Multiple of 4 would be 12. I to the first, that would give you this. So this one is, all of these is just a 1, and this is I. So the answer is I. Okay, well, good luck on your test on Module 4. I know some of you have done it already. Keep in mind that I'm anxious to give you partial credit, but it needs to be in your homework log so I can see the work and give you partial credit. All right, we'll wind this up.